In this video, I'm going to show you how I created this sci-fi corridor animation in Blender. So in this video, I'm going to go through the entire process and show you how I created this sci-fi corridor. So this isn't a step-by-step tutorial. It's just going to be more like an overview of how I created this sci-fi corridor in Blender. So I incremented the save as I was working on the Blender project. So I'm going to be going into the Blender files and just showing you how I created the different things. And also, if you'd like to purchase this sci-fi corridor environment, I'm selling it on some different 3D model sites as well as my Patreon and Gumroad. So links will be in the video description if you'd like to purchase this model, and that'll also help to support me. So I hope this video is helpful, and let's get started. So I just started off by adding a plane, and I just started modeling some sci-fi details into it. So what I did is I just added loop cuts by pressing Ctrl R, adding some different loop cuts, and then I just extruded some parts in right here, extruded some other pieces out, pretty simple stuff. And then I also added the mirror modifier onto it. So I added the mirror modifier going across there, and also added this little plane kind of coming up here with this angle here, and then also this little piece right here. What I did is I added two loop cuts really close to each other, and then I went to the face select and alt selected a loop, and then I just extruded it down to make the little dip right there in the sci-fi corridor. And then after I did that, I added the array modifier. So I arrayed that over, and you can see now that's starting to look like a ground for the sci-fi corridor. So after that, I started to model the walls. So I just used the same object, and you can see I just extruded up the walls. Pretty simple stuff. Just used a plane, extruded it up, and made the walls for the sci-fi corridor. And then I decided to make some pillars in the sci-fi corridor. So what I did is I just added a cube, and I just deleted half of it and then added the mirror modifier. And then I just extruded the cube down and kind of extruded out here. If I just hide this, you can see it's pretty basic. I just extruded some pieces out, kind of moved them around here, and then added another cube here and scaled the cube up to make this bottom part right here. And then for this little detail in here, I went to the face select, just selected a face, and I pressed I to inset it. And then I pressed B after I pressed I, and that turns the boundary off. You can see right here it says boundary B on. If you turn that off, then that way it's going to be connecting with the mirror modifier. After that, I just pressed E and extruded it back to make that little hole in there. And then I just added a circle and just extruded that out to make these little beams right here. And then I needed to add some sort of light, so I just made these lights here, kind of these cylinder lights. And so this was pretty simple. I just added a cube, added the mirror modifier, just modeled these simple lights. Alright, so now I need to add more detail to the walls. So again, just kind of doing the same thing, just grabbing little parts and kind of extruding them in. I also modeled a few little objects here, like this object right here and this object right here. And then also just extruding some of these faces in like this, and just making this little area in here. And later on I kind of add a sci-fi panel in here with some buttons and stuff. And then for this, I just extruded this back, and then I added some cubes and I just duplicated them and just made that little detail in there. And then this little beam right here, this is pretty simple. This is just like a cube, and I just extruded it up and then just brought it in there and make those little sci-fi details. Pretty simple stuff here. And then also right up here, I added some loop cuts by like going Control R, adding a few loop cuts like that. And then I alt selected those and extruded those back, so like this. And then I just selected those edges and pressed Control B like that. And that's how I made this little part right in here kind of coming back. And then I wanted to add some Sci-Fi Tubes to make it look cooler and add more detail. So this was pretty simple. I just added a circle, and then if you go to front view and have that circle selected, you can hold down the Control key and click, and that's going to extrude it out. So I just did that and just made the shape of the tube, and then just extruded that down just by pressing E, and Z, and just bringing that down. Pretty simple. And then for this bottom part right here, you can see that this is slanted, and I wanted this to be slanted the same as this metal piece right here. And so you can kind of, rotate this on the y-axis, kind of rotate it over, but you can see that now it's starting to get smaller, so you could like extrude that out. But that kind of gets messy, so an easier way to do this is to use Blender's Shear feature. So what I do is I just press F3 and just search for the Shear, and there it is. Mesh transform shear, and then when you do this, you can see it's going to start to rotate it. What you need to do is you need to press Y or Z or X to make it go on the axes that you want, and then I just rotated that down, and you can see that now it's shearing it down and making that angle. So I just made the angle pretty similar to this angle of this metal piece, and you can see if I press 7 for top view, go into wireframe, you can see that it hasn't messed up the shape of that circle, so it still looks like a perfect circle, but it's been sheared down. So the shear feature is really cool. And then just extrude that up and scale it down, and then right here just added a bit of a bevel and just made those little shapes right there. And then if you're wondering how I made up the ideas for all the different sci-fi details, I feel pretty bad at making up like cool designs for sci-fi details. What I did is I just went online and I found a bunch of like sci-fi textures and other cool sci-fi models, and I just got a bunch of reference images and put those on another monitor, and then I kind of looked at them and got reference and inspiration from those other models and other artworks that I found online, and I used that as inspiration and reference to make my own sci-fi details. Alright, so then it was time to make the ceiling. So these beams here, I just extruded these out and kind of connected them. And then very simple, just extruded these out and connected them up to the ceiling right here. At this point though, I decided to make those doors in the very back because I knew that I wanted some kind of cool sci-fi door. So I'll just show you how I made this. So this was really simple. I just added a plane and then added loop cuts right here. So Control R, added loop cuts, and then just brought these pieces out and brought this in. And then I just duplicated that over, and then just brought this out here to kind of match the door. So that way it just adds this really cool sci-fi opening here for the doors, so that then they could open like this and it kind of matches together. So then I also thought it would be cool to add some bolts. So you can see I just modeled a very basic bolt. Now because I duplicated these bolts so many times, I probably should have made it lower geometry, because this is kind of high detail for something as simple as a little tiny bolt. So it probably would have been better if I had made this lower detail. But it was okay, I do have a pretty good computer, and so it was able to handle it pretty easily. So I just duplicated these around, kind of put them in some cool areas, and then gave them random rotations every time so they look just slightly different. It is a very small detail, but you can see it does start to add up and just add some more detail there into the model. And then I wanted to add some sort of like sci-fi panel thing. So I made these very simple buttons, and then I also made this like touch screen here and just stuck that in that little extruded area to kind of make a cool sci-fi panel in the wall. And then looking at this, this does kind of look kind of repetitive right here. So I wanted to add another hallway kind of right here in the middle. So I just duplicated this and stuck it right here, and then later on I'll go and delete this stuff right here to make the hallway that goes right through it right here. And then I finally arrayed those beams over so that they were going through the entire corridor. So I already had the mirror modifier to mirror them, but then I added this array here. So I added the array modifier, set the count to 5, and then I turned this up, and that way there would actually be some distance between them. So yeah, just turn this value up, and there we go, looks pretty cool. And then I wanted to add another panel, like a sci-fi panel. So on these beams here, I just modeled some basic stuff, pretty simple, just some buttons here, and I just like added a cube and did some things with it, added some bevels and stuff on the edges and made this kind of thing, and then made also this circular thing. Pretty basic stuff. And then I also thought that adding some vents would be cool, so I added these vents here on the top. So this was pretty simple. I just added a cube and then beveled it on the side here and extruded that in. And then because it has a mirror modifier, it's also on the other side. Now, as far as these little metal panels go, these were pretty simple. I just added a cube. Let me just bring this out so you can see it. Added a cube and just scale it down and made it really thin, and then just stuck it into the air vent or whatever this is. Now, how I made all of them going down is I pressed Shift D to duplicate, then I clicked with my middle mouse wheel and brought it down the Z-axis, and then just clicked to place it right there. Then what you can do is you can press Shift R, and Shift R is going to repeat the last action that you did. So you can see if you just keep on pressing that, it's going to repeat the last action, and it's going to make that cool sci-fi vent look right there. Alright, so it was time to start with the materials because I thought I had modeled enough that I kind of wanted to add the materials and just see how it was looking. So I actually started off in the Cycles render engine because Cycles is more realistic and I do usually like Cycles better, but then later on I switched to Eevee and just decided to use Eevee for the rest because I thought Eevee did look pretty cool. So those emission lights were lighting up the scene, and I just added some basic white materials to start off with. And I do like how that looks. It looks pretty cool. And then also right here, if I just go right over here, you can see I just modeled some basic circular lights, and then I just gave those a slightly blue emission material, and it just gave a cool sci-fi look. And then also I wanted to add some more pipes, so I just modeled some basic pipes coming down here. And then also right up here, I modeled another pipe just the same way as I modeled the other pipes, just kind of coming through and going over here. So then I added a basic metal material to all of the metal objects. The metal material that I used was this metal 003, and this is on cc0textures.com. So I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to download this. I just downloaded the 4K JPEG and used that for my scene. And I really like this material because it is pretty shiny, but then it has a little bit of scratches and some little bit of rust and dents. So I think it looked pretty cool. And then I wanted to give some more contrast in the colors. So you can see that some different parts here, like these little sci-fi details right in here, I made some of them darker metal and then left the other parts to the lighter metal. So like these tubes right here, I made those darker, and then I also started to add in the materials for those sci-fi panels. So I made some of the buttons like red glowing buttons, and then I also made like some blue light screens, like some touch screens or something that you might press some buttons on, and then also did the same thing for here. And then I decided to work a little bit more on the modeling. So I took this entire object and I duplicated it and I rotated it over to make this piece right here. And then for this piece, I decided not to use these beams right here. So these beams that I created right here, I decided that I didn't want to add those because I just wanted to make this one look a little bit different, because I wanted to give a little bit more variety and make it look a little bit different. But I just duplicated this over, and then I went ahead and just deleted this piece right here so that these hallways could connect. So to do this, I had to apply the array and mirror modifiers. So I just applied those, and now this is all geometry, but that way I could just delete this. So if I just hide this, so basically what I did is I just cut through this and made a little hole right in here. And then if I just go into here, you can see that these don't really match up because there's like some big pieces right here and some chunks coming out here, and like this little piece here, they didn't really match up, and so I needed a frame to fill those gaps. Like there's some holes in here and stuff. So what I did is I just added a cube and added the mirror modifier and just used that to make a basic frame to connect these two hallways. And so there it is in Cycles, and I do think that it is really cool. And then pretty soon I kind of switched over to Eevee and decided that I like the look of that better. So when I first switched over to Eevee, it looked like this, and that's because I didn't actually add any lights other than the emission lights. But in Eevee, the emission material doesn't work because Eevee is a real-time render engine. It's not a ray traced engine, so it doesn't have physically based lighting. So it didn't really have any light to use other than just like a little bit of reflections there. So it looked pretty bad at first. So what I did to make Eevee more realistic is I added this Irradiance Volume. So if you press Shift A and go to the light probe, and you can see that there's a radiance volume. What you can do is you can scale this up and just scale it to the shape of your scene, and those little dots right there, just make sure those dots are in the center of the scene and kind of filling the entire scene. So I just added this one Irradiance Volume, and then if you go to the render settings right here and go down to indirect lighting, you can bake indirect lighting. So when I bake that, it basically bakes the lighting. It's not as realistic as Cycles, but it definitely makes it more realistic, and you can see that now it definitely looks better. Now, because I only baked it in some certain areas, you can see that like where the Irradiance Volume ends, it gets really dark, so I needed to duplicate those and add more Irradiance Volumes, but it did make it look more realistic. So I added some more of those Irradiance Volumes, and I baked the lighting so that it was lighter in more areas. Now again, because we're using EV, these emission lights wasn't really going to work so well, so I added these area lights, and I just turned them to rectangular, and then I turned the shape up to make it the shape of these circular blue lights. And then I stuck those lights right there, and then you can see now if I'm rotating this, it's actually kind of affecting the light of the scene. And then to make it even more realistic, I added a depth of field. So if you click on the camera and go to the camera settings, you can add a depth of field. And then I added this empty and told it to focus on the empty. So you can see if I drag this empty really far away, it starts to get more blurry, and then if I bring this closer, it gets a lot more focused. And then I thought it would be really cool to make more blue and red lights, because I think blue and red lights are really cool for sci-fi stuff. So you can see I added some more red lights and then also made the lights a bit more blue. So I wanted most of the scene to be kind of a blue feel, because blue is pretty cool, but then just added a bit of red here, and then also over here I added more red later on. And then also down here in this dark sci-fi hallway, I thought it would be cool to add some red before it goes to black, and I thought this looked really cool because, like, you know, it looks kind of mysterious and you don't really know what's down the hallway, and especially since it's red, it looks a bit more dangerous. And then I also wanted to give a little bit more variety in the texture and the color, because I wanted like some of these pieces to be more darker and stuff, so I added in some more metal materials. So for the frame around the sci-fi doors and also for the pipes, I downloaded this one right here, Metal 008 on cc0textures.com, and I really like this one. It looks really cool. I like all the little scratches and things, so I will leave a link in the video description if you'd like to check this out. And I downloaded the 4K JPEG. So I added those to this frame right here. You can see it looks pretty cool. And then also for all the pipes, I added that material as well. And then for the ground here, I thought it would be cool to add a different texture. So I found this Diamond Plate 004, again on CC0 Textures. Their textures are super awesome. Links in the description if you'd like to check this out. I just downloaded the 4K JPEG, and then I just selected some of those sci-fi details and I added those diamond plates onto the ground. So you can see here is what it's looking like so far, and this is really starting to look pretty cool. And then I thought it would be cool to add something more to those doors, so I looked online, looked at some reference images, and other people made some like cool letters on the doors, so I thought it would be cool to do something like that. So what I did is I found a free font online, a font that I thought looked pretty cool and looked kind of sci-fi, and then I made this image right here with a transparent background. Then I opened this up with Krita and I did some editing to make it look a bit scratched and old. Alright, so here we are in Krita. So what I did first is I wanted to make it black. So I clicked on this little button right here, and what this does is it makes it so you can only paint where there is color. So if it's transparent, it's not going to paint on it. So then I just went around here and just made these letters black. And then after that, I grabbed this really cool brush here in Krita, and I'm pretty sure this brush is built into Krita. As you can see though, I have added in a lot of my own brush packs for Krita. So I just found a bunch of free brush packs online and added them into Krita. But I believe this one right here is built into Krita. So it's a really cool brush. You can see it has a lot of detail there and it looks really cool. So what I did is I turned on the eraser mode by clicking right up here or by pressing E, and then again I clicked on this button so that you can only paint where there's actual color, so where it is transparent you're not going to be able to paint. And then since this was set to an eraser, I could just go along here and click and I could erase parts of the letters, and that way it kind of makes it look like either it's old or worn. Also maybe turn the opacity down and just go along here and make those letters look really worn and scratched and old. So once that was finished, this is what the letters looked like. So then in Blender, I used the Images as Planes add-on. So if you go to Edit and go to Preferences, then on the add-ons here, you can start typing in image, and you can see there's import images as planes. So when you do that, you can press Shift A, go right down here to image and click on images as planes. I added in the image here, and then I just stuck those very, very close to the door. So these are actually just transparent images of these letters, but they're so close to the door that they look like they're a part of the texture. And then to make these move along with the door, I just parented these objects to the door. So you click on this one, shift click on this one, Control P, and I just did the object set transform. And then when I animated this, you can see that the letters are moving along with it, and we could open up those doors. And that's it for the Sci-Fi Quarter. So the Sci-Fi Quarter was finished now. So then I went ahead and made that animation with that character with the rifle kind of walking through the Sci-Fi Corridor. So I wanted to make some sort of weapon for the character, so I decided to make a sci-fi rifle. So again, I just got some reference images online just to get some ideas about what sci-fi rifles could look like. And then I opened up a new Blender file and just modeled a basic rifle. So this is actually too high resolution. I probably shouldn't have made it this high quality because that's a lot of vertices. My computer handled it fine, but that's not really ideal. But as you can see, this gun is pretty simple. I was pretty happy with it though. I just added some circles here and just extruded these out to make the scope and also the front of the gun right here. And then the rest of the gun was basically just cubes that I extruded out and added a bevel to them. And then for the materials, I decided to use this metal 006, again on cc0textures.com, just downloaded the 4K JPEG. So I just added that onto the gun model, and if I just zoom in here and kind of look at the reflections, I do think it looks pretty cool. So then I imported that gun into the final scene, and I'll also show you the camera rig that I set up. So I wanted to animate this entire thing, and kind of have the gun move along with it. So I pressed Shift A, and I went right down here to empty, and then I added the sphere. And when you add the empty sphere, it adds this right here. Added a camera, and then I parented the rifle and the camera both up to this, so then I could just animate this and they would both be moved along. So then in the camera view, you can see that if I rotate this empty here, it's going to rotate the entire thing. Now, as far as making the gun look like it was in someone's hand, what I did is I tabbed into edit mode and I moved the gun over and then tabbed back into object mode, and that way the object origin of the gun is right over here. Now the object always rotates by the object origin unless you change it for some reason. You can change the pivot point, but on default it's set to median point. So now when I rotate this, you can see that it looks like it's being rotated by someone's arm. So if you have a big gun, you're going to be holding it around, it's going to be rotating by your shoulder, and so here is the character's head, and so the shoulder is going to be somewhere kind of around here, and so that way I can just click on this, and then if I just double tap R, you can see that now the gun is rotating around, and instead of the gun kind of rotating right here like where the wrist would be, it's kind of rotating where the arm and the shoulder would be moving. So I think that made it look a lot more realistic. I could just double tap R and then move it around and it would rotate like that. Now up to this point in the animation, I didn't really think I was going to add any arms because that would just add more complexity and take longer, but then I was like, you know what, this is turning out pretty cool, and so I wanted to add some hands to the character. And because I'm not very good at making 3D characters, I actually decided to photo scan the hand. So we have these cool sci-fi looking gloves. They're really just work gloves, but they look really cool. I really like them. They kind of look like astronaut or spacesuit gloves. So what I did is I took one of these gloves and I actually stuck pencils into it to make the hands stand up. And I kind of moved the pencils around in the glove to make the fingers all apart so that when it photo scanned, the fingers wouldn't be merged together. And then what I did to make the palm kind of thick is I actually stuck some towels up into the glove to kind of thicken it up. And then this is my black jacket. So what I did is I actually took a paper tube and I stuck the paper tube right up into the glove, and then I filled it with some towels to kind of thicken it up and add some weight to it. And then I took my jacket and I pulled it up through the paper tube, and that way it kind of made a little sleeve for that gloved hand. And then I kind of propped it up with this little box right here, and that's what I used to photo scan this arm. So then I just used my phone camera and I just went around here and just took images of the glove. Just kind of went all the way around, did some images higher up and some images lower down. Now for the photo scanning software that I used, you need at least 50 images for it to work. And the photo scanning software that I use is this really awesome free open source photo scanning software, and it's called Meshroom. So here is the Meshroom website, alicevision.org. This is a super awesome, really powerful photo scanning software. It works really well. I can highly recommend it, and it's free as well. Now, one downside to this software is you do need a GPU for it to work, but I'm assuming that probably most other photo scanning softwares are going to need a GPU because it does just take a lot of power to do photo scanning. I haven't really tried any other software though, so I'm not sure if you need a GPU for every software, but I do know that you need to use a GPU in order for Meshroom to work. So in my file browser, I just selected all these images and I just dragged them right into Meshroom, and Meshroom just adds all of them in. And then what you need to do is you need to look at the images and make sure they all look pretty high quality. Now, if there's a tiny bit of blurring, then that's okay, but if there are some blurry images, then that can mess up the photo scan. So I just went through here and looked at these images and made sure they were good, and just deleted any images that were kind of blurry or didn't look so good. And you can see right here it says 59 images, and you need at least 50 images in order for Meshroom to work. And if you'd like to learn how to use Meshroom, I learned it just by watching some tutorials on YouTube. So if you just want to go onto YouTube and look up some tutorials on how to use Meshroom, there are a lot of great tutorials. So once I added that in, I just saved this file and then I clicked on Start. Now Meshroom has all these nodes here, kind of like in Blender, it uses nodes, and you can see that it just does all these different things like image matching, feature matching, and camera connection, depth map filter, meshing, and then right here at the end texturing. So as it's going, you can kind of see its progress. So these little white things here, these are all the cameras, and what's so cool about photo scanning is it uses the data from the images and it can actually make this 3D mesh. And it actually knows where all the cameras are in 3D space. So it just sticks everything around, and then you can see it's actually constructing this hand in 3D. And then if you go into the Meshroom cache, you can go into texturing and then go into the folder, and you can see that there is a textured mesh.obj, and this is your 3D mesh that you can add into Blender. And then also they have a texture right here. This is the texture map for the gloves. So in Blender, what you do is you go File, you go Import, and then you import wavefront OBJ. Then what you can do is you can just drag this in right here and then add the textured mesh OBJ. Now it may take a little while to open because it is kind of high quality, but once it opens, you can see here is the object. Now it does look pretty bad, but if I go into the material preview, you can kind of see how this is, and you're probably gonna have to like rotate it and kind of align it, but you can see that this actually looks pretty good. So there are some like extra pieces here, like the box and also like the shelf and stuff. So what you're gonna need to do is just go into edit mode and just select the parts that you don't want and just delete them. And here it is, so it looks pretty cool. When you look in here though, you can see that there's some little glitches right here and some of the fingers are kind of connecting. So what I did is I actually went into sculpt mode and fixed the errors a bit. So once I worked with the hands a bit and fixed them up, here they were. So I just went into sculpt mode. You can see I kind of pulled this stuff down, kind of smoothed some things out a little bit to make them look a little bit better. And then also deleted the bottom side. And then I also mirrored it over to make two hands. And then also, if your mesh is really high quality, because usually photo scans are pretty dense, what you can do is you can click on Add Modifier and add the Decimate modifier. And then if you turn this ratio down to like, I don't know, a 0.4, it really depends on your object, you can apply that. So just apply the modifier. And now if you tab into edit mode, you can see that this is way less dense, but you didn't really notice any change. So you can see here it is. And you can see this is a lot more dense and this is a lot less dense. You could even go farther. So if you add another decimate, set this to like a 0.3 or something, you can see it starts to kind of look a little bit different. You can see without it and with it. So that's getting a little too low quality, but I might change this to like a 0.4, apply that, and you can see that now it has a lot less geometry. So this one, you can see how dense that is, but this one is a lot less dense, but it actually looks pretty much the same. You can't really notice any difference. So that's a really great way to make your object less dense without retopologizing it. So once those were done, I actually threw them up on Sketchfab. So if you'd like to check these out, these are on my Sketchfab profile. So here they are, the Sci-Fi gloves. So then I went back to the main Sci-Fi Corridor Blender file and I appended these into the file. And then I needed to pose these and animate these. So what I did, if I just go right in here, you can see that I added some bones. So here is the bones. I just matched these bones up to the object, and then I just did some basic rigging. So what you can do with just simple objects like these is you can select the object, then shift select the bones so that they're both selected, and then if you press Control P, you can set the parent with automatic weights. So if you do that, most of the time it works pretty good. So if I just go into the pose mode right here, I can just select some of these and kind of rotate them, and you can see the fingers do work pretty well. And I can like rotate this thumb and stuff. And let me just select the arm. You can see if I rotate that, it does look pretty good. It is simple, but for something like this, I didn't really need a very complicated rig. Also, if I click on the pivot point and change these to individual origins, I can double tap R and you can kind of see the fingers are kind of like rotating around. And this is a good way to see if the rig is working pretty well. And yeah, it is working pretty good. You can see if I kind of turn this, the hand kind of closes by itself. So yeah, it does look pretty cool. And then I parented these gloves to the main controller so that when I move this, the entire thing is going to be moved. So then I just started animating. So I just kind of rotated this around, made it, look up, kind of made him walking around here. The animation wasn't too hard. Now something that I did do to make him look like he was kind of walking more is on each keyframe I'd make one keyframe a bit higher and then one keyframe a bit lower to make him look like he's kind of walking and his head is kind of, bobbing up and down. Also his arm holding the gun, I made it kind of go a little bit more forward, then go a little bit more back, and then go a little bit more forward to kind of make him look like he's walking, and so maybe his shoulders are rotating a bit. And then right here I kind of made him step up a little bit because there is a little metal thing down there he kind of has to step over. Walks over here, and then he kind of looks down over here at this control panel. And then this was probably the hardest thing to animate to kind of make that hand look realistic. So I just animated those fingers, kind of made him tap some buttons. And then these doors were pretty easy to animate. They just kind of slid open. Had him kind of walking up here. He kind of looks down here because he kind of has to step up on those. And then he walks up and then it stops. And by this point, it is really dark, so I just had the animation fade out. Now to make this look even more human, I wanted to have some kind of random head bobbing, kind of like in a video game when a character is just kind of standing there and their head is bobbing or something. So this is the head bob that I made. So you can see it's pretty basic. The gun kind of moves on its own a little bit, kind of like the hand is just kind of moving around a little bit. And then his head is just kind of randomly bumping around a little bit. So how I did this, if I just go back right over here, I opened up the graph editor. So if I just open this up, go to the graph editor, maybe I'll just make this a little bit smaller. Then if I just select the camera controller, you can see that there's all this noise here. So if I go full screen here, if you press N to open up the N panel in the graph editor and go to the modifiers, you can see that there are modifiers, and I added the noise modifier. So what I did is on the main controller, I added the noise modifier onto all the locations, so X, Y, and Z, and all the rotations, so X, Y, and Z rotation. Here are the different keyframes, but you can see that there's just a little bit of random noise here added into the keyframes. So it's really cool and it makes a really great head bob, as you can see right here. And then I did the same thing here on the arm, so the arm kind of randomly moved by itself. So then in Blender's video editor, I edited this all together and I added in some really cool sound effects and some music and stuff. So I added in some sci-fi background noise, kind of like maybe some fans going or something. And then I also added in the breathing, and then I also added in some steps here. So all these little parts here, these are all the steps of the person walking on the metal with their boots or whatever. I added in some cool sci-fi button sound effects. And then I also added in some hissing sounds, and then I also added in some mechanical machinery sounds to make the doors open up. Now all of these sound effects were free and Creative Commons 0, and I got them all from freesound.org. So freesound.org is this super awesome website where you can get free sound effects. Now the music that I use for the scene, I got that from productioncrate.com. So productioncrate.com is a super awesome website where you can get music, sound effects, stock footage, you can even get 3D models, and tons of assets for VFX. So I just hopped over to their royalty-free music section, and then I just found a cool sci-fi ambient music that worked really well for the scene. So I just threw in those music and sound effects and then rendered out the final animation. So that's it. That is the creation process of this sci-fi corridor. So I'll throw the final animation right up here at the end of the video so that you can watch it again. But with that said, thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful if you wanted to make your own sci-fi corridor to kind of get an idea of how I created it. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoy the animation, and I'll see you in a future video.